Welcome to the Making Sense of Martech podcast, where we interview leaders and put them in the hot seat. I'm Jacqueline Friedman, founder of Monarch and global head of advisory for the Martech Weekly. Today, we're going deep on something most people only whisper about: the gatekeeping and old school consulting models that distort how enterprises build their Martech stacks. And it's not a small problem. BCG found 70% of digital transformations fall short of their objectives, which explains why the quote-unquote help turns into permanent engagements for the foreseeable future. Gartner forecasts worldwide IT spending will hit $5.43 trillion this year. And so the cost of getting this wrong compounds really quickly. Accenture Song alone is a $20 billion business, and Martech is projected to grow from $131 billion in 2023 to $215 billion in 2027. So the cost of these forever engagements really add up very quickly. And so, to be clear, me stating all of this is not to say all consultancies are bad, but it is about the incentives, the structure, the capability transfer, and how quickly support becomes dependency. And so we have a special guest today who has lived through this from the inside and now helps teams fix it. In this episode, we're lifting the curtain and asking, what would Martech look like if practitioners, not gatekeepers, built it? So first up, a little bit about our guest, Satya Upadhyaya. Satya brings over 15 years of experience leading transformation across brands, including ANZ Bank, Citibank, BankQuest, NRMA, and casinos. He's a true end-to-end practitioner, and he's known for bridging business architecture, campaign execution, and systems integrations to solve real Martech problems. It's so great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Pleasure to be part of the conversation.
I'm excited to have you. So let's dive in with a few rapid fire questions just to get us started. What was the first Martech tool you ever used?
That's a good one. I started with Unica. Unica was one of the utopians of campaign management tools that was later bought by IBM and now is actually with HCL. So it's now called HCL Unica.
Oh, man. Yep, that's quite the acquisition journey for it.
Yes. Gone through a number of phases of acquisition in the last 15 years.
Yes. All right. What is one Martech myth you wish would just die today?
I'd love to answer that. Everyone thinks, and you've given a staggering numbers from BCG to Accenture Song to Deloitte. Martech is not complex. It's actually quite simple. And we'll talk about it. How do we actually create simplicity in Martech today?
That's music to my ears because it is complex, but the beauty is in simplicity.
Yeah.
All right. What is one small change you wish every marketing team would make tomorrow?
I think focusing on governance and marketing operations would really leap forward campaign execution, orchestration, decisioning, and transformation programs beyond technology.
I wholeheartedly agree. Without that core operational component, you can't scale and you can't do what you want as quickly as you want. So I'm a big fan of that. All right. Last but not least, something we ask everyone: who is someone you admire professionally or personally?
So professionally, if you're in the Martech space, if you're not following Scott Brincher, the father of modern marketing technology, you're actually lagging behind. So that's one. You get a lot of insights from him, following him. And there's a ruler in our time. We had in our history, Ashok the Great, and I follow him because I get inspired by him in a lot of things that he's done in Indian history. And this is about 200 BC, not 80. So I'm talking about 2,000 years of whole legacy, heritage, and history.
I love that. All right, let's set the stage and talk about how we're going to fix this forever model so many companies leverage. So one reason why this model thrives is organizations can tell you what they spent, but not what capability they got out of it. So when the scoreboard is vague, the engagement just never ends and you don't know what the final winner is. And ultimately, you're kind of a loser if you're on the brand side, in my eyes. And that should be the exact opposite of what's happening. We're supposed to champion you, the brand. And so I would love to hear from your perspective, what does the forever model look like in practice and what are the telltale signs?
So the reason why you have this forever model is because once a consulting firm gets in, they are actually, initially the engagement is for a short period of time to do a piece of work. As they complete that piece of work, they realize, or they've got their tentacles, they understand there's other pieces of work they basically get their hands on. And that's how the movement starts. Can I fix this? Can I fix this? And it's on a good side and a bad side. So a good side is if you build credibility, trust, and you've got runs on the board, the client's very happy and they want to say, okay, move on from X, go on to Y and start doing it. And that's why your forever model happens, right? But if the other side is that maybe you also want to have a niche skill sets and initial delivery. So let's take the example of if you want to do a strategy work, well, that's where your BCGs, your MBBs come in, and they do the strategy, and then they hand off that strategy to the execution, and that's where the SI partner comes into the integration. So that's a good handoff, okay? The MBBs are great at strategy, not the best at execution. So you've got the SI integrated partner, the likes of Accenture, the Deloittes, the Capgeminis to come and help you and drive that. So that's fixed engagement. But again, that forever engagement starts happening when you finish one project and you get to the next one, you get into the next one. The question is that do you want to be there forever, or do you want to basically do the job and then, how do I do the job, hand over the capability to the client, and the client basically takes it as BAU. Now, the challenge that you've got on the client side is that for them to take it on as BAU, they don't have the capability. And the capability here is more around the skill sets and the people that they need to manage that and monitor that on an ongoing basis. And that's why once a short engagement foot in the door becomes a long-lasting, everlasting engagement on the client side.
Sounds expensive.
Well, if you look at, so there's two things you talk about from an expense perspective, because they charge you an arm and a leg, and you can do that at a fraction of the price yourself. The downside of you not being able to do that is that you don't have those capabilities. So what you're basically in the short term, you're paying for that capability and skill set, where in the long term, you should be able to build that capability yourself and drive that change.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the primary drivers of why I became a consultant was to empower the team, because I don't want to be there forever.
Yeah.
I want to hand over the knowledge and train them up so they can oversee it, because they're going to do a better job than anyone else ultimately over the long run. They just might need some help along the way.
Yeah.
Get some pointers. Okay, so you've seen both sides, inside banks and also as a chief marketing technology officer. Why do so many enterprise teams default to these external consultancies instead of building those internal capabilities and resources?
Great question. So if you look at what exactly is transformation, so transformation and the components of transformation are effectively, tech enablement of the many things that they do. They actually do tech enablement. It's modern platform. They're looking at integration, data flows, automation, AI. Everyone's talking about AI, right? Now, if you want to see why we bring in consulting firms to do all of this work for us, is because they know how to scale operations. Our internal teams are not really, because transformation is a one-off project within an organization. Transformation projects for a consulting firm are bread and butter. So they churn this day in, day out, right? So the abilities to scale, they bring all the accelerators, they bring in the best practices, and most importantly, they bring in that rigor and governance to get that done in a short period of time. Right. If you had to do that transformation through your internal teams, if the consulting firm's X number of days, months, years, you can basically say 2x or 3x through your internal team. So effectively, short answer is that the consulting firms reduce your cycle time. Because of that, bringing those accelerators, being able to scale best practices, rigor, and governance, which will take a longer time from being on your client side. That's one of the primary reasons consulting firms are brought in.
That makes sense. And I guess if we were to look at it from the ideal state of the in and out consulting model, like what does that actually look like, and how is that even possible? Maybe
if you divide Martech especially, I believe that Martech transformation happen in three different stages. Stage one of the transformation is when you're really looking at what do I need? What technologies and what capabilities do I need, right? Understanding and auditing and going through an RFP, RFI, what's the solution that's going to be available, what my business requirements are. That's one phase. Once you've locked that down, you exactly know what your requirements are. You've locked down a vendor in terms of what product you need to basically buy. Let's say that's Salesforce, Adobe, Pega. There's so many things to talk about. Then when you bring that product within your ecosystem, you got to integrate that within your internal ecosystem, right? So you've got your legacy platforms, your data pipelines. You've got to connect the old with the new. That's your integration capabilities. And once you've done that, the build phase, then you go on to the run phase, which is embedding that within your BAU operations. And that's purely marketing operations and getting on that. So depending on which stage of the journey you are, that's where you bring in these consulting firms to do that work. But for example, you want to have BCG can come in and say, hey, this is what your business requirements look like. This is what your vision is. This is what your roadmap is going to look like. And I'm going to provide you a roadmap and a phased delivery approach. What are the capabilities you need? And I finish off from here. Thank you very much. Then the next phase could be, hey, go into Deloitte, Accenture, Capgemini. There are so many other firms to talk about. I'm not naming firms here, but the idea is that, okay, then they'll say, okay, we've taken that capability. We're going to embed that capability within your organization. We'll do the plumbing and the ecosystem, and our job finishes off from there. And then we hand it off to our BAU teams and take it from there. But then how do you actually hand it off from build into run? And it's always an overlap. And that's where that overlap, the first question that we asked is, how does it become a one-stop project to basically an all ongoing engagement? That handover never happens correctly or succinctly, as a result of which once in, always in.
Would you say that's by design, or it happens?
It just happens. So the question could be that what steps do we need to ensure that that doesn't just happen by default and we are able to actually have a smooth transition, which means that, again, because if you look at a transformation project, when do you involve your internal teams? And if your internal teams are involved from day one, then that's how they start co-creating. So that then they exactly know what's the purpose, what's the roadmap, what's the vision, what we are building, what the gap is, and how do we actually fill that gap. So there's no ambiguity, there are no last minute surprises. The reason why these engagements go ongoing is because we have last minute surprises. We've got these bugs and fixes that basically come during testing that no one's thought about. Okay, how are you going to fix this? You fix this, another thing comes up, another thing comes up. And again, we spend a lot of money, time, resources, effort on the consulting firms, but we don't spend the same amount of money, time, effort, and resources within our internal teams. If we actually put the effort and energy in training, upskilling our external teams, they basically can learn that faster. So we talk about that scale, that accelerator, that best practices, that rigor and governance. We should be able to equip our internal teams to drive that as well very, very quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's really like defining helping versus dependency, and like which one do you actually need?
Yeah.
And I guess to kind of dig deeper into talking about the tech and ridding potentially of the gatekeepers, there is an interesting component that in 2014, speaking of Scott Brinker, he co-published a Harvard Business Review article that predicted the rise of the chief marketing technologist. But then analyst frameworks and vendor logic took the wheel, and this is where we're at. So one, I'm curious on your thoughts on that article, but also as someone who has helped shape architecture strategy from the outside in, how do you see firms like Gartner or Forrester influencing client decisions, and how often do they have the right answer?
Good question. Now, how do I answer that? Right.
The spicier, the better. That's the right answer.
So look, so I'll take my time to answer that. Actually, the way Gartner and Forresters are designed, they influence procurement decisions. I might find a bit political, but that's how it is, right?
That's correct.
That's rather than operational success. The other thing, that's a beautiful article that he wrote, because that's where he said the rise of the chief marketing technology officers, right? And you don't see that denomination and with people's title very often, at least in Australia. You've only got a few.
Yeah,
America's really coming up, right? So that's why. So, and whenever you have that procurement decision, if you look at IT, who was responsible for that? And I've been fortunate, and that's why it's good when I'm talking, because I talk as a practitioner, having experience in all these different areas and pockets. So it actually it erupts from strategy and architecture. And strategy and architecture teams always look at Gartner and Forrester. So there are a number of reasons why they look at it. Okay, what are they predicting? What are they saying? Because it's a safe zone, right? So as I started off earlier saying, it's about influencing procurement decisions. So that's in Gartner, you can't go wrong, right? But the other thing is that organizations spend a lot of time evaluating those vendors based on Gartner's and Forrester's as to what they're saying. But they don't really see, is that an operational fit for your organization? If you look at Gartner or you look at Forrester, I'll give you some examples. They look at a vendor, let's name a vendor, X, their market presence, right? Their completeness of the vision in the territory that they operate, their ability to execute at enterprise. The word is enterprise and scale. You don't see smaller vendors in the Gartner, and there are other reasons around that, right? So what happens is that by default, the way the selection process works is that which vendor has the most experienced features basically gets tagged onto the Gartner or Forrester research. Whereas we as an organization, or I as a chief marketing technology officer, need to look at what platform will actually work for my organization, given my team's current ability, process
Yeah.
maturity, and integration complexity.
Yeah. All of those requirements sometimes get thrown out the window. And oftentimes, beyond just procurement, the golf game that makes that decision. And that's not the right answer.
That's right. So what works for someone does not necessarily mean that it's going to work for me. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, it definitely does. And I guess to that point, like we've highlighted some of the downsides, but like what is the ultimate downside of treating these analyst frameworks as gospel, as the singular answer?
Okay, so when you start just using those vendor frameworks, especially, and you're just only looking at Gartner and Forrester as an example, you're actually optimizing vendor capability instead of your organizational readiness, right? And I've seen many organizations that what they look at is, okay, we bought that tool, but did that tool fit for purpose? And I'll give you some life example. I was working on a project where the requirement was to have a loyalty platform. But when I dig deep into it, so the first question again, strategy and architecture, hey, let's look at Gartner, what the different types of loyalty solutions. And I said, look, okay, there are three different types of loyalty solutions. You've got pure play, then you've got the hybrid, and then you've got managed services, and then there are different capabilities in there. But then when I spoke with the business, the requirements of business was to actually, hey, we want to do engagement communication to ensure that we are able to frequently, at a regular interval, communicate with our customers. So you see, under the branding of loyalty, the real need was to do customer communication. Well, if you have a customer communication email and SMS platform to start off with, that does the job. Why would you like to spend $1 million onto a loyalty platform?
What do you mean? It's just throw away $1 million. Why
Your
not?
first stage is to get your engagement communication out with your members and build loyalty. Once you've got some runs on the board, then you can start looking at, and that's how you start having tech debt coming in.
Oh, yes.
That's one thing that I look at. Then the other thing is because why these things happen. If you've heard this term a lot in Martech about FOMO, fear of missing out, and that's more around because at an enterprise level, if I'm a bank, for example, and every bank is using X product and X capability, and if I'm not using it, well, I'm lagging behind. So I also need to have that. So it's one following the other without really understanding. Again, the what you look at my team's capability, the process maturity that we've got, the integration effort that's needed in, and the overall ecosystem that I operate in, and what I'm trying to provide value to my customer at. So that's where these challenges are. Then the third one is from a procurement perspective, risk averseness. So no one's going to fire you if you say, well, you chose this product because Gartner and Forrester suggested this. You chose this methodology because McKinsey suggested that. That's the insurance policy that people take to manage it. Again, it's controversial, but that's true
It
reality.
is it controversial? It's just an echoing of no one gets fired for buying IBM. Now it's no one gets fired for buying Salesforce. No one gets fired for buying Adobe.
Yeah.
And it's concerning. To your point, yes, it's helpful to reference what these conglomerates are saying of these platforms. However, where's the use case for you? What are the capabilities you need? What does your team provide? What are your team's own technical debt existing? Like that is something people forget to think about.
Correct.
No new platform is going to fix every problem if you continue to let it inherit your existing problems.
Oh, yeah, I think, and that's the biggest problem that we've got, right? When we look at a new platform, the basic question that we need to ask ourselves is that why are we investing in a new platform?
Yes.
What are the capabilities? What are the things that we wanted in the previous platform that we could not get out of the previous platform, as a result of which we need a new platform?
It surprises me how few can answer that.
Right. And the other bold question is that what are the things that we need to change that we did not change in the previous operating model or ways of working that we need to definitely change in the new platform, in the new ways of working to make that a success?
You mean a lift and shift migration isn't the answer every single time?
Well,
What?
the question is like, what is lift and shift? If you're just doing a lift and shift, and I've seen this time and again, like, let's take an example. You've got Salesforce, right? And you build campaigns in Salesforce, and tomorrow you want to build campaigns in Unica, you want to build it in Pega, you want to build it into Adobe, and you do a lift and shift. And then the transformation program happens. To do the lift and shift, we'll have to migrate assets. We're going to look at new data models, and the data is pointing this way, in this direction, in this capability, in that direction. That mapping needs to happen, upstream, downstream impact. But all that's great, and that's the maximum effort. But if you look at from a change perspective, when you lift it and shift it, hey, I want to do an engagement communication with our customers. Now, yesterday I was doing it on the Salesforce platform. Today I'm going to do it another platform. What did that fundamentally change? Right? So,
That's a good question.
and I think, and that's so the lift and there's certain components of lift and shift that's required. Okay. What are our creative assets? The copy, the content that needs to basically go same look and feel from a brand perspective. But the art of communication, autonomous marketing, journey led narrative, right? All that stuff that needs to happen, that needs to change. Fundamentally,
Yes.
how do we actually
Preach.
engage with our customers in the new world that's going to add value?
Yes. And I think that's the missing question often. How will this change add value for our customers? And it's often overlooked.
Yeah. If you look at the question, I think everyone talks about ROI. We want to measure ROI, but the reality is that what's the cost of the technology? What's the cost of sending something out from the new platform? What are the different elements that we need to take into consideration to really find out the ROI?
Yeah.
No one has the
Oftentimes
answer.
it's what are the costs of not doing it?
Correct. So, if you don't do it, what's the disadvantage? And if you do it, what's the benefit?
Exactly. Completely agree. The way you framed it kind of makes me think of, honestly, like high school or middle school, where it's like, oh, but this person has X. And it's almost peer pressure to follow along and not be a leader and figuring out what you need, what your own personal identity would like to wear, if we're making it so simple as clothing or attire. And it's very fascinating. It's like, oh, but this person has an iPhone. I want an iPhone. When in reality, maybe you like Android and customizing it more. And there's nothing wrong with either. It's just a matter of what fits the bill for the requirements you have.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's such an interesting facet. Like, and to your point, like, I'm an organization, I always want to sell, cross sell, right? But I'm an organization that doesn't need to sell.
Mm.
Now, it's all service based communication. Right, so everything is not marketing based, right? So it's be service led as well, right? And I was looking at, because I've worked in banks a lot. I've worked with ANZ, I worked with Bankwest, Citibank, and looked at a few things. So I was looking at what are the different types of communication that needs to be sent out to a customer that are non-marketing related.
Yeah. What are those transactional, operational,
Yeah,
non-commercial
and
messages?
I
And there's
was
a
able
lot.
to come up with a laundry list of about 10 different types of communications that needs to go out to a customer, which are non-marketing related. Now, if you
Yep.
think about it, okay, from a customer perspective, you've got one customer, you've got one opportunity to communicate with them. Now, what are you going to do? Marketing communications, service communications, compliance. So, there's so many things to talk about. Now, there's one way old school of thought could be, well, for everything as a linear process. Yeah, minute one marketing, minute two compliance, minute three service, and minute four transactional. The other bold way could be looking, and that's where the lift and shift came from. How can we look at the capabilities of technology and bring in all these different data feeds and look at our content blocks the way they are designed? Can we actually factor, if not everything, most of them in one communication that basically does the job? One shot, one hit, the customer receives it, they've got everything in there, and how do you manage that? But again, there's a bit of governance, politics, operating models, basically how to get that through. But this is, I think, that lift and shift needs to start thinking better ways of doing it, newer ways of doing it, looking at a new operating model and ways of working in the future.
Yeah, without a doubt. This approach to strategy architecture is really the practitioner-led alternative, I think you've really honed in on it and are referring to. And I guess I'm curious, before we dive into kind of the greater industry, you alluded briefly that enterprise software is the only option in the Gartner and Forrester realms. I'm curious why, from your perspective, smaller, more agile vendors don't make it into the reports.
The blunt and the short answer is investment muscle. Because to get into the Gartner and the Forrester, their inclusion actually requires a bit of money. It requires scale.
You mean it's pay to play?
Uh,
What?
there
I
is
say indirect payment, but
So there are certain criteria that they look at before they can enter you as a vendor to be published in the Gartner Forrester realm of, are you on the top or are you in the bottom where you are? But again, so that it's more about, so I look at, the Gartners and Forresters as a marketing positioning tool that is actually funded through vendor participation. Now, smaller vendors, because of their niche and scale and reach and the buying power, they are not able to meet that investment requirement. It takes them a bit of a while to get the required. Let's say Gartner says to be on the quadrant, you need to have 200 clients at a global level, right? And then they say, well, even that global level also means that across the 5 continents, you've got to have an equal representation or, some proportion of that. If a vendor is coming from another country and doesn't have a presence in America, which is the biggest market, all of a sudden you feel that it's not there. So that's the problem that you've got. Now, there are smaller vendors. They can actually solve your problem better than the bigger vendors because they could be a
yep.
point solution that solve a very specific problem for you. They integrate very cleanly through the APIs or native APIs, or they divide in your ecosystem, right? Their support system is quite responsive, right? But again, because they don't meet those criteria, they're not in that list. And as a result, they're invisible to the procurement team because the procurement team, remember I said earlier, when strategy and architecture look at any platform migration, transformation, capability build, they always go to Gartner and Forrester. So if you're not there, you're not in the consideration mix.
Right.
So, in the marketing, there's a word called prompted and unprompted brand awareness. So I think being present on these Gartners and Forrester is a prompted awareness, whereas the smaller vendors are basically the unprompted awareness people that they need a bit of love and affection in terms of how their visibility can be created in strategy and architecture team and the procurement teams.
You've nailed it. Yeah. I love talking about the elephant in the room because I feel like so few are scared to poke that bear, to mix metaphors.
Well, this conversation is all about being very open and transparent, right? So we're not
Yeah.
supporting anyone. We're just basically bringing a practitioner's view. And I think it's important and it's time for the maturity of Martech to really start having practitioner's view of people who've had the experience of running capabilities, ecosystems on the ground and talking what really works on the ground and below the ground rather than talking 30,000 feet above.
Agreed. And I also think the requirement for understanding use cases, every company has a different need.
Oh,
And there is no one size fits all solution. No matter what all in suite you go for, it's not going to solve all of your needs. And so it's really a philosophical organizational question of, do we go all in on one thing because it's easier from a procurement perspective? We are able to simplify contracts and those types of things. Or do we actually, to your point, do point solutions where it's a little bit more modular, a little more Tetris, but you're able to plug and play in the way your specific needs are and, invest more heavily in what's your unique assets and traits and capabilities. So it's a philosophical question ultimately. And I find it really fascinating just how deep it can be. It's so much more than just like, oh, this was on the Forrester wave, this was on a Magic Quadrant. It's so much more than that.
That's a conversation for another day. The best of breed and all in one and composable, and how do you decide that? And again, yeah. So
There's a lot of sweet fatigue, that is for sure.
absolutely.
Brought to you by our sponsors. If there's one theme that's followed me at every stop in my Martech career, it's trying to get good data into the hands of marketers. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about our sponsor, HighTouch, the leading composable CDP and AI decisioning platform. Companies like Domino's, Chime, Aritzia, and PetSmart trust HighTouch to power their data. And here's the kicker. 90% of customers have a real use case live in production within their first week. That means you can implement a world-class CDP in months rather than the usual years-long headache. That's why top brands choose HighTouch to personalize every customer interaction at scale. See what HighTouch can do for you at hightouch.com/MSOM. And now back to the hot seat. All right. So taking a step back to really thinking about the industry at large and this blueprint. It's been over a decade since Scott Brinker's original article in the Harvard Business Review defining what a chief marketing technologist is. And I don't think we've made it. I mean, both the title is not very common, but also the presence is not understood across the board. And so I guess if you could define what this role is today, I'd love to hear that. And also, what are organizations getting wrong about it and why is it not being recognized?
I was just writing a very long form article, preparing myself as to what exactly a chief marketing technologist or a CMTO does, right? Now, that also doesn't mean that they become a strategic advisory person who's looking at the life cycle communication strategy. And it's all about framing that from a technical delivery perspective. But reality is that the chief marketing technology officer role is actually an operational role. And when I say it's an operational role, it actually sits across three things: transformation, integration, and execution. Right. So remember, I talked about marketing technology transformation has three different phases. The first one is about understanding your vision, your roadmap, where you are, where you want to be, and how you're going to get there, and driving all of that business requirements, working with your procurement teams, Gartner, Forrester, understanding RFP, RFI, and embedding what you need as a capability for the future. That's the transformation. Then the integration is that how do I plumb that in my existing ecosystem? What's the upstream, downstream impact, legacy systems, APIs, integration? And that's a very technical engineering mindset. Now, if you're asking a marketing person to be an engineering mindset, that's not going to happen. Right? At the same time, and then the third one is the execution, which is about best practices, governance, what good looks like, and driving all of that. So, and that is a pure marketing operations function. And if you ask an engineering person to lead that, they basically will struggle because they don't understand that. So I think that's where organizations are really struggling as to what are the capabilities this person requires? Where do I find them? Who do they actually report into? Do they report into the CIO, CTO, or do they report to the CMO? When I'm interviewing them, what is the style of questions I need to ask? Because again, everyone's putting their best foot forward. And the question that you're asking is specific because you've got a problem within your organization and you're looking to bring in this person to solve that specific problem. But how do you frame that question to get the right answer from that person? You ask a question, I'll give you an example. You ask a question about change management and you ask someone who's got deep delivery skills and has an engineering mindset, will answer that in a very, very different way.
Very much so.
You ask the same question, again, change management, someone who's done transformation and a transformative business lens approach, they'll have a different answer. And you ask the same question to a change manager who's predominantly focused on the blast radius and the communication of change and bring that together, have a different answer. So what I'm alluding to this is that there's no right or wrong answer. It's your ability to really ask the question in such a way and, dig, 1 level, 2 level, 3 level down to basically get the right answer for them. Because what they're struggling, and this is where I've been thinking about this, I'm writing a large article on this, is that when I'm talking to an engineering person, let's say I'm talking to a CIO or a CTO, it's like I'm a caged bird or I'm a free-flying bird. Because when I'm caged, I'm mimicking my answers to suit your requirements and the vocabulary that suits you. And that's where I'm not flying free because I'm not able to tell you the pros and cons, the upstream, downstream impact, and how to bring all that together. And sometimes it takes, and that's why conversational interviews are better than monologue based interviews. Ask a question, so the way to interview candidates in this role also needs to change.
Agreed.
You can't be just sitting on a table and having questions prepared what you're going to ask, and that person is sitting there and he has to, remember what needs to be taught. So can we do a whiteboard? It requires again, as I said, a different style and different way of working to get that person out, because what that person is doing is that it's actually mimicking an engineering mindset, a strategic mindset, and an operational mindset, and it's trying to bring all that together. And in that, what they're struggling is that, where do I press the levers more? Do I show my strategy skills more, or do I show my integration skills more? And believe me or not, no one has all the skill sets. So this is one of
Imagine
those,
that.
right? I've led a very large team in my last role at ANZ, right? I had 75 people. The question was that, how much of the breadth of experience that you've got? So, I've talked to you about three different quadrants, and we've spoken about that in this conversation a number of times. That's the breadth that's required, right? I haven't seen personally myself anyone who basically knows that to a great level of detail. Now, to do that are people that have actually lived this type of life for the last 10 years, and now it's time for them to shine. So you're not building this capability by learning, reading some articles and books, and you had deep experiences. So who will thrive in these roles are really analysts that were there in the trenches 10 years ago. They exactly knew how campaigns were built, what the challenges were from a technology data integration. Then they've morphed into transformation projects, and they've actually, that lift and shift work that they've done. So they exactly know, when you go from platform A to platform B, what were the requirements, how do you map them through, traceability, all that skills comes in. And then gradually, okay, now then we started looking at vendors. So why did we evaluate vendor A to vendor B? I don't need Gartner. I exactly know I had these deficiencies in my product, and I'm looking at this new capability, and I need this. And will I get that, or will I not get that? And am I going forward, or am I going backwards? So you see that practitioner view starts coming in. Sorry, I took a long time to answer that question, but I hope that gives a bit of a sense.
It's a great answer. Just to kind of recap some of the three lines I heard. Yes, you mentioned three different kind of pillars of what type of minds of thinking. I think you want a marketer, in that you know how to speak to your audience. You're not a bird in a cage.
Oh,
You know exactly the filtration system with which to translate. And I consider MOPS and Martech the chief translators of all of the back ends, and the primary consultants who can pivot based off of who they're speaking to and the level of complexity that makes sense.
absolutely, 100%. So there's another word, like I'll take the example from the biological sciences, catalyst. The purpose of a catalyst in a reaction is to speed the reaction. So increase the GTM. But in that process, remains unchanged. So A plus B, and the plus is the catalyst, does the work, you produce C plus D, right? And in the C plus D, so C is a new component, D is a new component, but the plus, which is the catalyst, remains the same out of the reaction as well. So you rightly said, the purpose of the chief marketing technology, or the martech people, is actually they're glues. They're a glue, and they're a hybrid. And and that's where the identity crisis is, that are you in this camp,
Yes.
or you in that camp? So they're a hybrid that connect the CMO to the CIO, and they are really the translators. They are the business analysts
Exactly.
that really understand what needs to happen in this world. So like I call it, like, shamelessly this way, that behavioral marketers are fantastic, right? That's their bread and butter, to create customer journeys, orchestrate customer communication, onboarding, growing retention, right? That was done above the line marketing. They've done that for ages. That's what they basically live and breathe. Now what you've done is that you want to do the same thing using technology. And technology
Exactly.
is data and tech. That is because they have, they've grown up doing that in a different world. Now you're asking them to do the same thing with data and tech. That was until yesterday. Tomorrow and day after, you're asking the same thing to be done through AI. You can imagine, if I was
Yeah.
struggling as a marketer doing it with data and tech that way, how am I going to be doing that with AI? And that's another, the autonomous marketing, in terms of everything is going to happen. So that's why this role, this chief marketing technology officer or marketing professionals, has to really evolve. They need to be given the right respect, really understand what they're bringing in. And
Yes.
that judgment capability needs to change and reevaluated and constantly be evaluated based on the organizational need.
Agreed. It makes me think of, I've yet to see it done, but I see this role as the nexus and translation core of everything.
Yeah.
I see it as the separation of church and state. You're able to fully recognize the problems, unbiased, just you recognize what is and isn't working and recommend solutions that you partner with the non-technical and the technical to make it make sense.
Yeah.
But also, I think the true decision for an organization that has yet to really come into play is this person is on the ops team, is under the COO who operationalizes the business, whether that's tech or marketing. That's just is ultimately your stakeholders and partners, but those are your business units you have to work with to make them work together.
Yeah.
And I have yet to see it come to fruition. I'm hoping it does one of these days.
No, it will, I think, and I'm very passionate about this. And I think one of the things when I think about this role, one of the chief criteria that people should be looking at is passion. Because this is not something,
Yes.
hey, it's not like, hey, I think this is evolving, this is a cool thing, I want to be part of this. This is, I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
I live and breathe. I don't know everything. I'm dangerous enough, the little knowledge that I have, I can have some conversation with different type of people and bring people together. I think, you touched on that stakeholder, because the stakeholders don't know what they don't know, right? And everyone's actually operating in that zone of they know what they know. This
Yeah, of
person
course.
actually,
Everyone's in their own silo, no matter the context of
this
what we're
person
talking about.
actually brings it out, and it actually exposes them to the art of possible. So that question, that person, we are diving a bit more in the personality and the skill set that this person needs to bring along, is because it's just not about technology and capability, but how aware you are of the business problems your stakeholders are facing, and how aware you are of possible outcomes and solutions that are available in the market. Your job is also, that's why it's the glue. So my job is to connect a problem to a solution.
Well, and to your point, that awareness, it has to be the truth. You can be aware to problems, but if it's not actually the true problem, is revenue declining because there's macroeconomic conditions, or is it because we're oversending discounts, or both?
Correct.
There's a lot of different components where you have to be brass tacks, and sometimes those are hard conversations to have, where you're the truth teller, you're the fortune teller.
You actually given such a great example. Like, sometimes it happens a lot. And that's why, that last component of enablement and being able to do the marketing ops bit, like you run a campaign, you spend over, let's say, $1 million, let's the stakes be high. And as a result of that $1 million spent in that campaign, we did not really get an ROI. Now, everyone will start working on the fact that, what went wrong? Did we have the right decisioning? Did we have the right execution? Did we have the right channel? Did we have the right offer, the timing, blah, blah, blah? The reality could be it's nothing to do with the microeconomics. You've done everything correct. However, your competitor was a step ahead. And they had an offer in market at the same time as you, which was better. And that became a hero offer, and everyone took that.
Okay, so to double click onto that, how does one balance strategic vision, like that competitor in that one example, with operational control? Because if you get too visionary, sometimes operationally you can't keep up, and vice versa.
The brilliance is not in the strategy. The brilliance is actually in the execution, right?
Yes.
So you can have a great vision, but
You
without
have the best ideas,
you
but
can
if you
have the
can't
best
make it
ideas, right?
real,
But if you don't have operational control,
yes,
it's very aspirational. It's like you can have the best roadmap and you can be building that roadmap, and that's a 3-year transformational roadmap. But how do you actually execute on that, right?
Yeah.
So the true question is that how do you actually start with operational stability? So a lot of people actually go with the big bang shebang approach. Okay, we're going to do it this way. But what are the smaller building blocks, and do it one by one, fragment by fragment, which means that get your basics right. Most of the time, we basically want to get everything, but we forget the fundamentals, the basics that basically lay the foundation. And
What
once
do
you've
you
done,
mean? I thought AI could fix
oh, well, fantastic.
that.
Right, okay. Technology is an enabler, and AI is another piece of technology. So A is equal to B is equal to C. So A is equal to C. So again, AI is also an enabler. It will
I'd
actually,
push you. I would say technology is the catalyst, if and only if. you have your ducks in order.
Well, that's right. So the enabler actually so that's where you had that earlier word in terms of helping, and you talked about something with consulting in terms of how do you actually from help to what's the other word?
Dependency.
Dependency. So it's like you're not on the dependency side, so you're going to be improve the reaction time. So that I think that's
Yes.
where in terms of operational control and strategic vision, that's where it's really important, right? How do we actually balance that act? Because you can have the best tools, but if you don't have the right way of utilizing that tool, it's as good as having no tool, right?
Yes.
The operating model really needs to change. What worked yesterday in the scenarios the way it worked may not work today. Leaders need to go on an offsite and start thinking and chalking this in terms of what are the real challenges that we have across people, process, data, and tech. And you can't solve everything on day one. So, how do we solve that, right? So now if you look at the other way, the way restructures are happening, the way the tenure of people is getting short span, how do you actually run the full transformation? How do you bring all this together? And that's another topic for a conversation for another day.
It's not easy, but the thing I think of is actually vulnerability. You
Oh,
can't have this without being willing to be vulnerable.
and I think that's one skill set that leaders need to have is being able to express vulnerability in the open. And that's I don't know. And
We've
but
lost a lot of that, unfortunately. And
yeah,
I would also say empathy too, but you have to have some vulnerability in order to be empathetic. So cause and
I think for leaders to be vulnerable in this situation is a skill, is an art, and is a requirement. The reason for that is because no one has the answer. So
yes.
expecting even a leader to have all the answers is not the right approach. However, the
Yes.
approach for the leader needs to be I don't have the answers, but I have an understanding of where to get the answer for. And once I have the answer, I can come back to you and work on that.
The confusing beauty of that is sometimes there's more than one answer. And
Oh,
so it's almost a blind faith sometimes. You can have an educated guess and it might be wrong. However, it was the right solution with the variables and the requirements at the time.
and this is again, I so like this conversation because remember lift and shift projects. The question they get asked is that, oh, why are we doing this now? When and this is a very standard transformation, change management, resistance question that comes in. Okay, we did this something like this 2 years ago or 6 months ago. We did this with that technology, that vendor, that did not work. Why are we doing it? I think we focus a lot of energy in the why rather than retracting back and thinking what were the decisions that were made at that point in time and what were the conditions under which those decisions were made.
Yes, those are my favorite questions to ask. I'm like, yes, this is the current state. How did we get here?
Correct.
Walk me
Because
through it.
correct. Because it could be possible that yesterday I only had $100,000 to invest on this capability. And I chose this product because that suited my bill of 100,000. I can only do that procurement for that period of time. We realized that this is going to be a sunken cost or a tech debt that I'm going to take in for the next 3 years. But having said that, my utopian target state is this. And now I'm building a capability and skill sets and competencies with the team to get to that target state. So this is the
Exactly.
investment that we are doing to basically play with this tool, make mistakes, learn, and save cost. Again, we talked about that consulting model as to how do we, operationalize it with limited cost and limited budget in the long run. That's the so you've got to have, and again, these are the probing questions. The more
Yes.
again, we come back to that interview style of what the skill sets are. You'll get all these free flowing answers when you create an environment where I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm allowed, I can have hiccups, I can stammer. There's nothing such as perfect. I think that notion has to change, and you'll get the best out of people.
Yeah. Our own humanity
Yeah.
has changed. It almost feels like what we've been talking about is a unicorn. there
Well,
I
everyone talks about a unicorn, but they don't really understand what is required in the unicorn, right? Because now what you're looking at, and you'll never get that unicorn.
you could maybe get like a centaur or a pegasus or like a falcor, but you can't maybe fully get a unicorn. You can get close.
Because I've been doing some work, and I've been looking at the T shape, and I'm still working on it. Is that what are the different competencies and skill sets that are required? And I've actually mapped it across. I keep talking about the three pillars, but across the three pillars, I've mapped it across to about 15 or 16 of things of that. And that was purely because I used to think, okay, well, I understand a bit. I'm a drop in the ocean, but I'm based on my experiences of how I work and how I think things could work in organization. What are those different skill sets? And then I go back and talk with people, and then I try to understand how much do they know, and there's a gap. So when people think about the unicorn can be created, but the organizations need to be patient. They need that investment of time, effort, and people that's your career progression. If we're hiring you for the next 3 years, organizations ask this question: can you give me a 30, 60, 90-day plan?
Always.
Right? If I was the chief marketing technology officer, I was talking with someone in the US the other day, and we were just, asking this question. And one of the questions that came up in our heads is that, okay, what's the honeymoon period the organization needs to provide me for me to learn the nuances within their own organization?
Yes.
And how do I get across that? So those are some difficult questions that we need to ask people.
Maybe consultants are the right answer. Maybe it's not a singular person. Maybe it's an entire set of teams.
That's a very logical question as to why do we bring consultants in? The same logic approach. They've done this a number of times at scale, at speed, with agility, where there's no retakes. Scale, accelerators, best practices, governance, rigor, they have done this a number of times. So how old is the IT industry? 50 years of age? How old is Martech?
Depends on who you ask.
Scott Brinker said 2011, 150 solutions were there. In 2025, 15,000 plus. So even from 2010, 2011, 15 years. So estimates become guesstimates,
Correct.
right? So our ability to synthesize, do the assumptions, understand what will work, and the last minute changes, that agile framework, waterfall, all that is compounding. So consultants come in, they exactly know this type of project, this is what you need, this is the type of people that you need. For this work A, you need this skill set. For work B, you need this skill set. For work C, you need this skill set. We've already got all of that. We can package it together for you. So, we started off, are they good or bad? Well, they are good. There's opportunities
They're
for
the
them.
catalyst,
Yeah,
potentially, to
correct.
get things started so you can find your very own catalyst.
I like that word. They are the catalyst to find the new catalyst.
Yes, and I'm sure there's a scientific term for all of those things, and I don't know it. Now I'm curious. I'm going to look it up while we're talking.
Well, and as I said, I think there's a reason for existence for everyone, right? Everyone has got a role to play in the ecosystem, in the food chain.
Essentially, there's promoters. There's an irony there in terms of promoter promotion, who knows? But there's components that just it keeps that positive feedback loop and positive catalyst loop that it's hard to find, hard to do, but when done right, you don't even
Magic
need to worry
happens.
about ROI.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I think,
that's where the magic happens, or what I like to call a little bit of the marketing woo woo. There's just it starts singing and everything is working great.
yeah.
What would your first 3 moves be if you were building from scratch and you were entering into a mature enterprise with a significant amount of tech debt and existing platforms?
It's like, we talk about the 30, 60, 90-day plan, right? So what's your plan going to be? So I think the first thing I would, and I've always done that, is an audit. Now, the audit is about the current state of operationality as compared to the aspirations for the future. Because, then you can go into another conversation, hey, this is what we want to do, and blah, blah, blah. But really, map your current operational. And the way to look at it is that you've got to have your reference model, and your reference model talks about what do you have in terms of insights, experience, orchestration, all those different components that you bring in. And then what's your portfolio map going to look like? And your portfolio map defines in terms of what your vision is. And based on that vision, how again, it's all about present state, nothing future. What you're trying to deliver, what the gaps are in your current capabilities. Your portfolio map will then start showing you how things are structured and layered, and where the gaps are. Where's duplication of effort, people, processes, and where investment is required? What are your current projects in the pipeline, where how they actually have dependencies or interdependencies within themselves, and then the future target state. And then if you look at just from a campaign, because Martech is all about campaign execution, delivery, decisioning, orchestration, execution in my world. Where does the campaign execution world look today? Is that part of the data team? Is part of the capability team? Is that part of the marketing team? And if that's happening, where does the data sit? And more importantly, who's accountable for data quality when it breaks? These
Oh
are the
yeah.
pointy questions as part of the audit you need to understand. That gives you how the team's structured, how workflows happen. Who controls prioritization? This is not about
Yep.
marketing operations prioritization where the marketing manager is looking at it. This is not about campaign prioritization, which is the campaign team's looking at. This is the prioritization where marketing and IT are in a flux. Who comes in the
Yes, it's
middle to
where's
actually
that ownership? Where's responsibility? It
correct?
is a tricky
Correct.
mind mess.
The CMO says I want to vendor A. The CIO says I want to vendor B. Who wins and how? How do you? So these are the pointy questions
Oh
you're going to
yeah.
be, because you're not talking about, this is not an operational view lens. This is a strategic, visionary, operational execution, bringing that transformation capability, that integration, that execution rigor that needs to be brought in. So you've got to understand that. And then if you
You've got to
not
get through the prickly bits.
correct.
Otherwise,
Because
you wouldn't eat
because
this
if you
all.
don't, because when you do and when you ask these pointy questions, what happens is that you understand the operational reality. Again, what's happening on the ground. And this is not about being wrong or right. This is all about, hey, I'm really trying to understand the lay of the land as it is, how bad it is. Like I'm actually doing a series of posts till the end of the year, which is not talking about the good things. It's all about what are the bad things. Because before I talk to you about the good things, I need to tell you what the bad things are. And if you don't have a recollection and an understanding of the bad things are, you would not know where the improvement needs to happen. So before you go on improvement, so that's the first layer I would like to look at. The second, I would say, I need to build. So if you look at why these bad things happen, and why do they happen repeatedly? So which means that there's no permanent operational or an operating function that is required to fix it. So
Right.
I really
What can we automate? What
correct.
can we?
How do we
Yep.
automate all of that, right? And which is all about how do I make things quicker, better, faster? How do I have consistency, governance, all that in place? Which means that I need to have a robust marketing operation function, and I can talk to you about another day because that's another kettle of fish, and kettle of fish that we need to basically solve for data governance and vendor management, because these are not project roles as a start date and an end date. They are true transformative roles that keep looking at how do we do things better, simpler, faster? How do we morph? How do we actually get to a better state, change our ways of working? So it needs to be constantly evolved. What is our vendor landscape looking like? Who are our new vendors? Imagine company, you're working in a company, you can't introduce a vendor for 12 months because the cycle time to onboard a vendor is 12 months. In 12 months, the market changes, your business requirements changing. You've got a leaking bucket, you have an acquisition problem, you want to basically solve that. So
And we wonder why Gartner and Force are always behind.
correct. So you got to look at, so how do I bring agility in operation? So you got to learn a lot of these jargon from the IT world, from the construction world, from life sciences, and start bringing. So that's the most important thing. And then the third thing, because there's a lot of change happening, and the fear of failure, doesn't allow people to do those changes. So I would really create. I'll carve out a set of people rather than saying I want to do a proof of concept. I want to say, I want to trial something really innovative, something new, and demonstrate how it actually works. That gives my stakeholders the ability and the confidence that this type of things work. And I've done this in previous lives where I've looked at marketing automation, end-to-end execution, rather than saying, hey, I want to do this. I've already done that in the past, in the background, right? And then all of a sudden, hey, let's have a meeting. I'm going to walk you something that I've been building, and this is how it looks like. And this is, the cost, this is the effort, this is the benefit. And all of a sudden, everyone's nodding. So those are the three things, if I had my way of doing my 30, 60, 90, I'd really focus on.
That makes sense. And I'm having a hard time kind of summarizing our entire conversation because it's meandered in a good way. It's gone through all the pros, all the cons, coming back to the pros, and then reconsidering the cons. And I guess for anyone who's listening, in terms of how do we actually navigate Martech and the stack itself, the leadership challenges, the three main takeaways that I'm gathering from this conversation to really try to summarize is: first up is audit. You got to not only audit what existing consulting engagements exist for signs of dependency or unclear value, but also audit your tech stack and what's working and what's not working, and be brass tacks about it. And then second, really challenge the standard reference architectures by mapping your business needs first. You need to know what your primary goals are this year, the next 5 years, and whether those are in line with what exists or what you're wanting to exist. And then thirdly, really design to enable the roles internally. And that's including this chief marketing technologist we've been referring to and these operators on marketing operations and Martech, so that you can empower transformation and make it more than just day-to-day maintenance of those vendors. Because if you're going to have that Ferrari, you need to get tune-ups, you need to get the premium leaded gas, and you need a really good driver for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, our last question is, who is someone we should have on the podcast?
I've been in Australia. I've been working a lot with a guy by the name of Pavan. He's the head of Martech at Bupa.
Yes, I know Pavan very well.
And I think me and Pavan have been talking about this. This is very relevant to this conversation, where we've got a Gartner Forrester way of, you know, reflecting on what needs to happen and what technology needs to be bought. But there's no practitioner-led way of defining what that needs to happen. So if I had my way, like, hey, should I go to Gartner or Forrester? Oh, we've got a pool of 20, 30, hopefully it becomes bigger, practitioners globally who are talking about this, and they are abruptly, bluntly, politely, all those different adjectives can be used, are talking about what's happening in this space and how you should tackle that. And I think that practitioners, what we need, and this conversation is all about not trying to talk the fluff, but it's really talking from the heart, from the aspiration and the inspiration that people have, and bring a practitioner's view of, hey, I've done this, and trust me, I've done this in the past in 5, 6, 7, 10 different organizations, 50 different implementation. I know what I'm talking about, and I can help you understand. If you do these things, you'll be better off. But if you don't consider X, Y, and Z, it will have ramifications in the future that you basically get debt, and ways of working will not be working, and all that. So I think that's one person you should be talking to.
I wholeheartedly agree and already talking to him
Ah,
fairly
fantastic.
often. Thank you so much, Satya, for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where can folks find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so
Thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you for having me.